bring in Steiner Sports CEO Brandon Steiner.
One of the country's top memorabilia mogul.
I have an unbelievable guest, Brandon Steiner.
Brandon's second to none.
Good morning. No sense in wasting any time, although most of you are probably wasting some time. You've done around the cooler, you've talked about all the football games, the money you've won and lost, everything else. We get to a serious topic. My next new favorite book, Brainwashed. I have my friend here, Merril Hoge. You've probably noticed him, Steeler running back, but more probably you most likely remember him from ESPN, fantasy football, a staple for years on ESPN. And when he usually gives some advice, I usually listen, because not only did he play the game, he understood the game. When he came to me and told me about this book, I knew that he was serious. I know this is an important matter. I've talked about it on this show before. So if you're a football fan and you care about the future of this game and the future of the players, stay right where you are. We'll start taking some of your questions from Merril. But first of all, welcome. How are you,
Good
my
to see
friend?
you, brother. It's nice to be here. We went to a little tour, and you talk about in awe. I mean, this place, I love sports, been a part of sports for a long time, but this place is, the Mecca. I'm telling you, I was holding all these pants. Boxing trunks from one of these fights. I'm telling you, that's a pretty cool experience.
If you came back next week, I think the tour would be different. It's every day.
It is. The World Series is concluded.
Now we're on the way. We've become Red Sox fans all of a sudden. And congratulations to them. That's an amazing team. What's nice for a change is you see a team like win the way they're supposed to win. Really class, just the way they went about their business, and very consistent. It's nice, because not so much the me factor as much as the we factor.
The team, team factor. I only got to one game this year, and actually it was in Fenway Park. I went and watched. I was in Boston.
Can't
and went
beat
there.
It, right?
No, I helped launch a new football league called Your Call Football. That's out of Boston, and so we were there, and they were playing. So I got to watch the World Series champs.
Yeah.
Earlier this year.
They were special all year, so if you caught them even on any day, I think that was the beauty of it.
And that was a Yankee game, actually. It was a Yankee series.
Yeah.
Too. So, that's a
You think about the
big
Yankees,
deal.
they're 2 at-bats away really from probably being there. They were a really good team too, but Boston just a little better. We'll get back to the league you started in a minute. I want to talk about that. Brainwashed. This is a subject matter that seems to me was really, really hot now, because the NFL has definitely seemed like it's reacted. Is it still a hot subject? And what have you found out? Well, first, why'd you write this book?
Well, because I think it's a really misunderstood subject. And here's where I'm gonna. I guess it's the best way to start. I did play this game. I coached this game for a long time, but I come at this perspective as a dad. I'm a parent. My son started playing at age 7. He's a quarterback at BYU. I've been coaching youth football for 15 years. Started camps in '91. Almost coached for a decade as a youth football coach, and I'm passionate about young kids and playing not just football, all sports. And actually, this is not even just about sports. This is if your kids are active. It will be an informative book for you to really clear up what the science says versus what we see in the media. And I guess that's the best way for me to start. Is I see the headlines too. I see the things that would scare you to death. And so it really sent me on a search to find out what is the truth about the science, what are the real facts. Being in sports, seeing the headlines and seeing what things are written, and being in a locker room and knowing the real truth. And when you read something, you're like, that's not even the truth. That's
So
not
what is the
close.
real truth?
Well, here's the real truth. I went out and asked the question from across this country, and I even went to Canada. I searched the neuropathologists up in Canada, and everyone that I talked to, they would say this to me: Merril, here it is. The CTE is a pattern that we are observing. We don't know what causes it, and we don't know what it causes. We have cases that you hear about that played football, part of sports, and then we have cases where they never played football, they never were in contact sports, they never had head trauma. And I'm like, well, how can you only hear about the sports ones? You don't hear about the people who have had the CTE pattern outside of sports, never had a concussion, never had a history of head trauma. I'm like, how can you never hear about that? Because that right there tells you can't just target sports,
But
and you
head
can't
trauma,
be specific
head
to
trauma
football.
lifts the numbers up, though. Is it head trauma the common denominator?
They have no common denominator right now. That's what I'm saying.
I could get CT without getting concussions.
Oh yeah, People have had CTE pattern and never played sports, never had a concussion. And when I started to hear that disconnect, and that's actually where I really came up with the title Brainwash, because I'm like, people just think now, they run around in fear thinking, oh, if my kids get a concussion. And I'm thinking it from a parent's perspective. This is about youth sports for me. It is not about the NFL. People try to keep bringing the NFL up, and I'm like, that's not why I did the book. I'm passionate about giving parents the real truth of the science, and that's why the book was important, because it's complicated. It's so hard to understand. That's why I got Dr. Cummings, who's really featured in the book, is a 3-board certified forensic professor out of Boston University.
He broke it down?
He broke it down, and I got a lot of other doctors in there from Canada across this country to help explain not only the science standards, but the steps in science that you must accomplish before you can use it as scientific. When you start understanding how all of these steps have yet to be done, but yet it's portrayed as it is done, that becomes bothersome. Because really you're portraying something you can't prove scientifically.
So you're saying that we're now all thinking that football is the cause of this problem, but maybe it's not?
I'm not saying that. The science papers say that. I'm the messenger here.
So football may not be as, let me rephrase it, football may not be as bad as we may think it to be?
Well, when you compare football and when you say football can cause CTE, there's no scientific evidence of that.
Really?
No, yeah. I mean, so even you believe the science is not there yet.
I'm thinking my kid's on the field, he's banging his head-to-head combat, he's going to end up with concussion, he's going to end up in a vegetable at some point or dying early, or that's what I'm thinking.
Did you play youth football?
Yeah.
Okay, how old are you?
59.
Okay, I'm 53. I've been playing. I played for 22 years, and there's hundreds of millions of people who have played not just football, youth football,
right,
but hockey.
Youth. Yeah, I only played youth
because we're talking about youth, and to even have that thought process to me is disturbing, and that's unfortunate that
it's
you
honest. I mean, I feel like when my kid came home and said, "Dad, I don't want to play football anymore," I was like, "Thank you." Oh, I was so nervous about the danger of it.
You will.
And now when I sit down watching on a Sunday, right? Everything is head-to-head combat. The flags, every play is a flag, and there's so much talk about the head-to-head combat that I'm thinking.
Well, listen, the football has done. I go back to when I started coaching youth football. When my son wants to play, people go, "Were you nervous he was going to get a concussion?" And I was like, "No," and here's why I wasn't: because I was going to do something about it. I was going to establish a protocol. That's what didn't happen to me in Chicago. That is really. I can tell you the greatest danger of head trauma, it still exists today, is if you don't take care of it when it happens. And the protocols that are in place today, the treatments and therapies that are available that nobody hears that much about.
So you like the action that colleges and pro football teams are taking? The protocol, taking the player off the field right away,
absolutely. All that. And then the treatments and protocols that they get. But again, it's not about college. It's not about the NFL. 99% of our football players, and then kids that are active are 8 to 18. And that's why in 2008 I went to Congress and I was like, listen, we need to create or challenge them. Let's create a protocol, a standard protocol for all youth sports. Obviously, it was specific to football at that time. And I talked to the experts in the field, what's the most dangerous thing, and I know this from experience because it happened to me, is if we return to an activity that we're a part of after we've had a head trauma. I go, what would be the safest window? Well, if you get a 2-week window, that could really remove you from danger. Now, remember, this is in 2003 that I'm talking about this. I implemented in my youth program in 2003.
Okay.
Because I implement that in my youth program and it becomes a part of what we do in the youth community, I help USA Football launch a Heads Up program that our principles I learned from Chuck Noll, how to be a better, safer player. But that protocol is also a part of that launch. It gave us at least a protocol and a criteria to do something for the kids when we were doing nothing. Now, the protocols and the treatments now are so much better even now than back in 2003, back in 2008 when I went in front of Congress and said, if we do these things and if Congress were to step up and mandate that we did that, we create a better, safer environment for our kids. You know, we force schools to say they don't return to play, they can't play the next week. Let's get them evaluated before they return. Like if we just did those safety mechanisms, we create a better, safer environment. Now that's about protocol. See, now you can't get the two confused, because now you're looking at a thing called a pattern of CT, and I always use the pattern because that's how the neuropathologists across this country and in Canada you refer to it. It's a pattern. They don't know what causes it. They have cases where they are in football, they're not in football, they are in sports, and cases where they have no history of sports, no history of concussion. And that's what bothered me and why I wrote the book too. I was like, nobody knows about the cases where they never played sports.
And you talk about those cases?
Yes, we talk about the case.
So
we
it gives
explain
people
it.
a sense, a balance. So I guess if you're a parent out there, a coach out there, this is a perfect book.
Right, especially
Which
if you
gives you a
want to know.
perspective on all this, right?
It gives you all the information, and then you use that to make a choice on what's best for your family. Still doesn't mean they have to play sports, but listen, I coached a long time, and I would always have a kid that was there, and I could tell he doesn't want to play. So I would talk to him, and I'm like, hey, why are you here? And he said, my mom and dad, I'm here. So I talked to mom and dad, and they'd say, well, we brought him because you're coaching. And I'm like, nah, you're just making this harder for me. I'm like, and I would talk to him, and he'd be passionate about A or B. I'm like, feed his passion. He doesn't have to play football. My son played all kinds of sports, but he was not a real baseball-driven guy, okay? Every time we left the field, we went through our batting order, we got our 3 outs, we went back to the field. I was always missing a second baseman, and it was my son, Bo. He was always playing, running around. He didn't like baseball. So after a few years, I was like, all right, it's not his passion. So,
but quarterbacking, that's a big stage. That's real.
Yeah.
Nervous at all, though, or
No.
you feel like he's been taught, he knows what to do if something happens. Is that it?
That we're gonna, yes. I was gonna apply a protocol. Well, I'm never gonna allow him to return to a game with a concussion. Now, keep in mind, Bo gets his first concussion 4 days before they play in the Las Vegas Bowl. Slips in the shower. Okay, not even on the football field, but because it's 4 days before the bowl game, he's ineligible to play. Now he was the backup. It was his freshman year, but the protocol and the standard, it doesn't matter if it happened it doesn't have to happen on a football field. It could happen anywhere. Slipping in a shower, being active in the backyard, falling off a trampoline. You're not going back to that environment until we take care of it.
I see there's some pretty prominent people here on your book that got behind you on this book. If there's one major lesson you want to take from this book, if somebody out there watching, what's the most important lesson they're going to get from this book?
That the true science papers say things completely different than what you see in the media. You do yourselves a favor to read the book so you understand what science is really saying versus what you see in the media, because they contradict each other. And you've got our website, brainwashbook.com, where we have the science papers. So we want people to read it.
So you go to the website, also get some more,
and you can read the
answer
science
questions?
paper. Yeah.
Okay, you guys answering questions?
Yeah, we do that too.
At the end, if I had a kid playing football,
Okay.
or if I really had a real interest in caring about the future of this sport, this is a book you got to read probably.
I don't think there's any doubt about it.
Because otherwise, even when I sit there and watch, I'm a little conflicted. Because I'm feeling like guys are risking their lives and they're going to be brain mashed potatoes down the road. Is what I'm thinking. As I'm sitting there, I'm like, this is like barbaric.
That's the title. I'm always fascinated by, especially now. There can't be a bigger sports nut historian than you.
I'm crazy about it.
Okay,
but when
how many former NFL players are there? Do you know?
I'm going to say 100,000.
It's 27,000.
27. That's it.
27,000.
Wow.
Okay, but it's 27,000.
So what happens is when one pops out of the cake, it's
Yeah.
much more dramatized because
We really go through
when you
those.
see Harry Carson or you see McMahon, you go like, wow, but
For every Harry Carson or Jim McMahon, listen, that's another thing we do in the book. We got to quit creating excuses, about mental health or post-concussion syndromes. We need to get him help, and there's great resources, great treatments, great therapies. We need to get that information out. We do it in the book too. There is help and hope for people. Brain health is a vital thing, and it is an important thing. I think most people think, take care of my body from the neck down. Nah, taking care of your body's from the head down. When you look, and I talked to a lot of the experts, they always refer back to these things in all neurocognitive diseases. Here are some of the leading candidates: obesity, inflammation, drugs, alcohol, opioids, all of those things we have a control of, but they all play integral roles in our health, from cancers, cardiovascular disease to brain health, and those things are scientifically proven that are a part of, our short and long-term health and how we take care of ourselves. So we do that in the book.
So
we
you really
really
have
explain
to
that.
implement, in a sense, I'm sorry to cut you off. You really have to implement some of this stuff in high school and college to probably educate the kids more about how this all works. I think we got to add a lot more mental health issues.
Very true.
With kids that are younger too, gauging.
I try
if a kid was sick, he stays home, but
Right.
he's not feeling right, not feeling well. Mom's like, get to school.
Right. Listen, it's about creating a good lifestyle.
Yeah.
And how can we? And this is sports is a great component for helping create a healthy lifestyle. Because even though in youth football, there's 52 weeks in a year. We play youth football, depending on your league, 8 to 11 weeks out of the year. If you look at the next 40-some weeks that you have, what are kids working on? Well, you know what? In order to play next year, I got to be eligible grade-wise, so I got to work at school. I want to keep my body in shape and stay healthy. So it's a platform to help create a healthy lifestyle, get kids passionate about and confident in things outside of sports, relationships that are built. I mean, sports are so vital in developing confidence, the relationships you build, the
Teamwork.
experience. I'm gonna just tell you this. When I went on this journey, I had questions like anybody else.
And
I'm
it
a
is
parent.
a journey.
Oh, a long
Because
journey.
you're fighting against the grind. You're going against the current at this moment.
Very true, but I will tell you this: I've always been confident with a couple things. As long as I've done my due diligence, done the work, talked to the experts, and I know what the truth is, I have the evidence of the truth. Now, the one thing that is very important: these scientific papers I'm talking about, they're scientific papers everybody uses. It isn't like you got a science papers, I got science papers, and we're debating here. It's the science papers that are in the community everybody is using and should be using to create the narrative. So it isn't like some papers. So that's important. That's why they're on the website for you to read so you can get clarity. But I went into this thing with a completely open mind in a sense of I want to know the truth. Because I will tell you this, if I thought for 1 second that they had the scientific evidence to prove what we hear in the media, my son would not be playing football. And I'd be worried for myself. I sleep perfect at night, and my son is still playing football. And I just want parents
You took
to
a lot
know-
of hits.
I did get into my career. And here's what happened, though. Improper care on the first one. I get cleared over the phone 5 days later to return to play. Now, even in 1994, getting cleared over the phone, we were far enough along then to have a better standard of care then. Now, keep in mind, I came from Pittsburgh, where I was doing cognitive testing, and I started that in 1991. I was the first group of players to ever do that, and it was voluntary basis. But they were at least doing it for a couple of years. Now I get to Chicago, they don't even have a neurologist on staff, and they have no baseline cognitive testing. Now, I am not throwing the Bears under the bus because I'm going to go back to what was known in 1994. Even though the Steelers had been doing it for several years, they're working through things. They don't know exactly what this is or will be. When I get to the Bears, though, the way my career ends, I do think, hey, wait a minute. If the Steelers are doing A, we at least need that standard of care in the NFL. Because I'm thinking just the NFL at that time. It is 1994. You always got to remember where you were at that time. And that's why I took that NFL doctor to court, is I just felt this standard of care is even inappropriate at 1994.
What happened in that with that lawsuit?
I won the case. It gets turned over later in a court, and like I tell people, I didn't do it for
The money.
In fact, I asked my lawyer to do it just on principle alone to make change in the protocol. So when they declare a mistrial over, it's in the book here, I talk about it, I settle for a significantly less amount of money just to make sure the verdict stays down so we can make change.
Progress.
So it was about care at that time, and it still is, and about the NFL. And then when it expanded to NCAA started doing things, but youth football was way behind. We weren't doing things, and that's what this book is for, is to help really youth programs across, not even just football, all sports.
We'll do some questions for Merrill Hodge. If you got any, just click in there below. Love to hear from you. We're going to autograph this book. We'll give it out to somebody that's lucky out there. I got to change the subject for a minute. Because, you know, it hit me when I saw you when you walked in and said 21 years at ESPN. And there's a lot of people that watch this particular program that are entrepreneurs or trying to disrupt, change their lives. What's it like? I mean, you did something for 21 years. Then you did, you know, obviously the football is a big part of your life. And now it's a reset, refire, right? You didn't retire because I think you're pretty active from what I could see. Talk to me about that transition and how you went through it. And has it been good? Has it been interesting? Has it been hard?
You know, actually, my first book I wrote, this is actually my second book. The title of that is Find a Way, and that's been a life philosophy of mine. Those words have helped me live a dream and fight to live. They've inspired one thing in my life, action. They've inspired me to do things about things, try to find solutions, not create excuses. And I remember my career ended prematurely in Chicago. I was emotionally and mentally a wreck. I was going through depression. I was seeing counseling. I was laying on a couch one day. I was enjoying, I talk about this in this book, Brainwashed, about watching Barney with my daughter who's 2 years old, okay? And I was enjoying Barney.
Love Barney.
And I said, when I like a purple guy like that and I can't wait for him to come on, I got a problem. But I used those words to inspire action to do something. All right, yes, my career was over. It was devastating the way it happened. But I had taken some counsel from the greatest man I've ever met, was Chuck Noll. And Chuck Noll would always challenge us players, listen, football's not your life's work, man. Find some other passion and your life's work outside of this game. Work on that in the off season, schooling and other things, build relationships. And I had done that in kind of coaching and broadcasting. So I really just cast out lines again, followed up on relationships that I had built. And Mr. Rooney actually calls me and asks me to come back to the Steelers and be the first player to go into the booth with Myron Cope. Well, nobody can pass that opportunity.
No,
I was excited.
You were ready to roll.
I was ready to go. You know, and ESPN, Craig James was a big helper of mine and a guy that, you know, I'm a product of a lot of people. I need to say that right off the bat.
Me too.
Okay.
No, it's no question.
No way did I do this by myself.
You couldn't fit him on I-95.
Exactly. So I'm so grateful for relationships when I go back to what this sport is about and, you know, sports and activities and relationships that are built. And he really helped me at ESPN get me a chance there, so I helped launch ESPN2. I was doing college football in the Steelers. And so that's what started my broadcasting career, although I had thought about coaching.
People don't remember, ESPN2 was really a stepchild that they were nervous wasn't going to make it.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah, and we launched college football on ESPN2. People might not know this when you think about ESPN history. It may be one of the great trivia questions. If you go ask who was the first host of fantasy football there,
really?
I bet you nobody would guess it's me.
Wow.
In fact, I was.
So you've been all into fantasy forever and a day. Do you still play?
I always thought I don't play it as much now. But they came to me because I talked to them about I wanted to expand my roles. I wanted to do more things, you know, and get outside my arena of being an analyst. And they came with me to the idea they're going to launch a fantasy show. And
that's crazy.
I launched. I was the host for 2 years there. Nobody would ever know that, but I helped launch that.
Susie Kobla too. You gotta give it right. She's really like the staple of ESPN too in a lot of ways.
You know, when if I remember this correctly, Susie had just come back because she had been at ESPN and then went to Fox, then came back. But she is, she's the queen of football. And then she's a dear friend and she's
withstood this test of time.
Respect her.
Right.
She's just, you know, listen, you know this in your profession. I think every profession would concur to this when you talk to young people and they go, you know, what are some of the keys to really be successful? You know, first, your willingness to work and be prepared. Those are things you control and you do in life. If you do those things, boy, you have a chance to be really successful. But being prepared is so important in any craft that you have.
So you took that right to the broadcast booth?
I took everything that really I learned on a football field and transitioned it to my life's work.
Now, how does that transition now? Because you're not, you know, there's not that consistency now going up to Bristol and doing that. How do you reset now?
Well, I do. Actually, I've been transitioning over to motivational speaking. That is what I predominantly love. I mean,
Love that.
I moved into a third passion in my life that I didn't see coming, and the foundation of that is my find a way message.
Oh, cool. So you're doing corporate speaking around the country,
right, around the country,
keynotes, conferences, stuff like that.
A lot of those things,
cool.
and I try to share a lot of things I learned inside the white lines of a football field, but those words have helped me live a dream, yes, but they helped me fight to live, and that's more important. When I was diagnosed with cancer, I share the story of that journey and how those words resonated, and how something as devastating as that probably saved my life, because it led to me having open heart surgery 3 years ago. And those words, find a way, again, have to resonate with me to inspire action, really focus on the things I control, things that I can do to help this journey versus things not to worry about, like how did it happen, why me. And I try to, in the presentation, really share with people they have the two tools known to mankind. The two most powerful tools are our mental and spiritual energies, how we go about using them, exercising them. And then I walked through a litany of examples where I learned from other people. Walter Payton was one.
There's no question.
Walter Payton was one of my great, I admired him, respected him.
A big part of the Steiner history, Walter.
Rightfully so. But I share the stories of Walter Payton indirectly and then directly when I met him as my rookie year as a Steeler. But then when I played for the Bears.
I'll take your best Walter Payton story if you don't mind sharing it. And I have to ask you about Chuck Noll. I think just one of the most undervalued,
yes.
Nobody gives him the props of what he accomplished. He was really very quiet. You don't hear much about him because you hear about Belichick and Parcells. But,
right.
Chuck Noll, maybe one of the greatest coaches of all time.
When you look at Paul Brown, George Halas, and Chuck Noll, you could argue there's the three-footers of our game. To answer your question, I do share a story in here about Walter Payton, one of them. I won't share that one. Maybe it's the one that started the whole thing for me as a young boy. I'd heard about Walter Payton, all the things how he used to train, and it was an interview that I saw with him. And the interviewer asked him, what makes you better than everybody else? I was like, oh my gosh, I'm 15 years old. Like, this is my moment. This is what I want to know. And I'm thinking, okay, it's got to be protein drinks, and I'm gonna run to GNC and buy all the protein drinks. I'm like, oh, I hope he doesn't say, well, I got a genetic gift nobody else has, so you could just forget it. He said something. He paused for a second, and he said something as profound as I've ever heard a human being say it. He looked her in the eye and he said, I want it more than they do every day of the week. He said on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and Saturday in the off season at 6 in the morning when I go run that dirt hill that I'd heard and read so much about, he goes, I want it more than they do. He said then on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and Saturday when there's not 65,000 fans in the stands, cameras aren't rolling, I want it more than they do. And he said then at 1 o'clock on Sunday, you better believe I want it more than they do. Well, I was like, oh my gosh, that's an attitude, that's a mindset he's created. I'm like, I can do that. I was like, so every day I practiced, every day I trained, every day I played, I would think that term. I wanted it more than anybody else.
I love that.
And I will tell you this, and that's why, okay, now, if you really think of that right there, there's not a person listening or watching that can't apply that to whatever it is in life. That is an attitude, it is a choice, and there's a thought process. The key to it, he said it clearly. Every day of the week. See, somebody can do it a couple days here and a couple days there.
The things you do every day are far more important than the things you do once in a while.
No doubt.
I think the key also with Walt, having gotten to know him, was he's a much bigger giver than he was a taker.
Oh.
And I think you can control that too. Can you be generous? And
I share that in the book.
And that's what's amazing about, or I found about Walter, was his generosity, his ability to just want to give.
Yeah. I share that in the book, a story that impacted me still to this day. There's probably not a day that doesn't come by that I don't think of the moment that I share in this book about that giving part that's impacted how I handle people, how I talk to people.
So I remember we were in New Orleans, we were doing a trade show for a pharmaceutical company, and we decided we want to go to the mall. Well, first of all, in the hallway, Walter's putting his tie on, and I said, wow, I really like that tie. He says, here. Like immediately, you give me your tie? Like he says, well, I have
Hope
10
you
others.
took it. Hope you took it.
I definitely took it. And he
Being
goes,
in
I have
this
10
business,
more,
you had to
but,
take
but I'm a
it.
tie collector. You know, I have Bob Knight's tie. I've got a couple President ties. I mean, I have a lot of issues collecting a lot of stuff, but love that tie. I was just looking at it the other day.
Well, wait a minute.
So
Can I give you my tie? I know it's not Walter Payton.
Yeah, it would be special though, wouldn't it? But you
All
know
right,
what?
here we go.
You know
man.
what?
You get my tie.
I
You
love
get my
it.
tie.
Well, actually,
You
go
get my
with
tie.
this.
And it
Man,
matches your
that's
shirt. All right, then I'll just
But
loosen up a little
what's
bit.
amazing is, and I may have another tie for you, but we go to the mall.
No, but see, when you give something to somebody, you don't
Yeah.
expect things back. That's a
Yeah,
true
give
giver.
as much
That's
as
what
you
Walter
can.
Payton
Yeah, that's
taught
what
me.
Walter.
So you're
So
good.
we're in the mall, and all of a sudden Walter sprints. You know, we're on one side, you know, the other side of the mall, and he sprints across. I'm like, oh God, this guy doesn't stop. And he's hugging this probably about a 300-pound woman who's probably about 60 or 70 years old. And I'm like, Walter, what's up? He says, well, you know, when that lady was waiting in line to get my autograph at the show, I told her I would never forget her. And I wanted to remember that. And I know that, I said, Walter, how many, he goes, you know something? I know that meant something to that woman. In fact, I ran over to her. I remembered who she was. I remembered her name. And I gave her a big hug. And I gave her a second autograph. I know she's going to remember that. And you got to build your fan base. And you got to build your relationship with people one person at a time.
Can I tell you something? I mean, for people who may have just heard that story, and then you always go, you know, you get a little skeptical. Like, I don't know if Walter was like that. I'm telling you, it's exactly how Walter Payton was. I share an example in this book, exactly what you're talking about. So that is
Yeah.
the most consistent, genuine man.
I got to ask you, I got to switch. Chuck
Okay,
Noll.
go. Oh.
You got to give me a good Chuck Noll story because nobody ever there's not enough talk about him.
Well, this I share this when I speak a lot of times. I don't have it in the book here. It was one of this habit or challenge, if you will, changed me from being a part of a team. Because as a rookie, I made it by special teams, and I was our third down back. But this challenged me. I created this habit, and it made me a starter in the National Football League for nearly a decade by taking this challenge on. So I'm going to go with my rookie year. It's the first week of practice. We're getting ready to play the San Francisco 49ers, who are coming to town. They got Joe Montana, Jerry Rice. They're supposed to win the Super Bowl. They're predicted to win it. They've already won Super Bowls, but they're supposed to win it again. So they're coming into Three Rivers. Again, people have to do a little history on who's Three Rivers. He's like, it's Heinz Field. That's when I was playing Three Rivers. We're at Friday's practice. Now, one thing about Friday's practice, everybody knows that's played in the NFL. Fans may or may not know this. You're going to have about a 20-25 play script. One thing you do in that 25 play script, don't make mistakes. I've seen people make mistakes, get cut right in the middle of practice, go away in a white van. I never see him again. I never wanted to go away in the white van, right? So I get in the huddle, and I remember the play's called, and it's a pass play. I know who I'm supposed to block if he blitzes. You know, you're always thinking, I hope he throws me the ball. So ball snap, quarterback drops back, my linebacker drops, I run to the flat route, throws the ball to the other side of the field. Wide receiver catches it, starts the run. As he's running, whistle blows. Merrill, what are you doing? Well, I turn back. Now listen, I've been in Pittsburgh 4 months. I haven't been there. But I've been there long enough to know one thing. Chuck Noll never stops a play and asks you what you're doing, if you're doing it right. So now I'm like, oh my gosh, if that linebacker blitzed, I might go away in that white van. So I located the linebacker. He was in coverage. I'd run the right route, done thousands of times. But when he asked me what I was doing, because the ball's on the other side of the field, well, I wasn't doing anything. So my response was, nothing. He goes, that's a problem. He said, I didn't keep you on this team, Merrill, to be a common football player. He goes, go help your buddy. How do you know, as he's running for his life, he doesn't get hit, fumble, and you could recover the ball for us? He said, better yet, Merrill, he breaks a key he breaks a tackle, you make a key block, we score a touchdown. I need you to be uncommon. I didn't keep you on this team to be common. We need to be uncommon in our effort. Well, I'll tell you this. I was embarrassed. I was devastated, but I'd heard what he said to me resonated with me. I was grateful I didn't get cut. But when I got back to my locker, I started to think about what he had done. He had challenged me to do more than I was doing. Now, if you would have asked me prior to that, leaving that huddle, do you do everything on every play you can? I would have told you yes. I was one of those players that did everything, I thought. But he opened my scope to more that I could and should be doing. Well, I would tell you that from that day on, I was an uncommon player. I could give you hundreds of stories, would bore you to death. But when you're as a team on Monday watching it together, and your teammate taps you on the shoulder, your coach says thank you, because it's something you did in an uncommon effort. You went beyond what you thought was just your
Chris,
job.
it's that one play that all of a sudden is like, how the hell is he there? It's the Jeter flip. It's the,
Things
it's the
like
one,
that.
It's the
It's
little
those
it's the-
efforts.
yeah,
And I'm going
that
to tell
makes
you
the
this,
difference.
that allowed me to be a starter the next year, and I never looked back, and I am grateful for that challenge. So, I mean, that's one of many.
Oh, yeah.
You know, but that was probably my first lesson. Now, keep in mind, I'm 21 years old. Everybody can identify with this. I'm smarter than anybody. I know everything. Nobody can tell me anything.
There's no
I
question.
know it
That
all. You
age, oh,
kidding
yeah,
me?
yeah.
I know everything at 21. And I was like, then I
But it
realized.
seems like you maintain being a student, even still to this day.
Oh, yes. Let me tell you this. There's nobody that knows. I always say this. This is the best way to say it. And really, that's why I go back to this book and why I'm passionate about this book, because I love my kids without
Because
end.
it seemed like you almost went back to school for this book.
I had to, especially from a science perspective.
You could almost get another degree having gotten in the middle of this.
I've learned more
It
than
felt like I was talking to a doctor to some degree, right?
Well, I would tell you this. That's
Which
why I
is
have so
dangerous.
many doctors in there to help me with it. But I go back to my kids, and I love my kids without end. And I try to tell people all the time as a parent, I've learned more from my kids by listening than I've ever learned by talking. His kids speak to us and say so many honest, truthful, just genuine, clear-cut things. I'm like, man. And I, as a parent, I've decided a long time ago, I'm going to make mistakes. And the best way for them, my kids, to be honest back with me, share with them when I've made a mistake. Put your pride aside just long enough to go, you know what? That's a good idea. That's a better idea than I had.
I think reverse mentoring is more critical now than ever.
Yeah, I mean, I
mentor a lot of kids. I'm sure you coach. But something, I need those kids mentoring me.
I listen. I go back to. I learn more by listening than talking. When you listen to them, and you listen to what they have to say. That's why I thought, even this book, I was like, well, we need to listen to the kids, and that's why, football, we have a lot of options. You've got tackle, flex, flag, 7-on-7. Those are optioned for a reason. I mean, to help if the kid's passionate about something, but you're concerned. There's different levels for you to enter the game. Get involved in the game.
I like flag football.
There's nothing wrong with flag football. Listen, now I'm just saying from a coaching perspective, I had more injuries and more severe head trauma when we didn't have pads on than when I did have pads on. So, like, I've had a kid tell me, go back to kids again. They're like, I don't want to play flag because I'd rather have pads on so I don't get hurt. I'm like, yeah, okay, then you should play tackle. I'll get you in pads versus flag. So the options are there for kids to really. And listen, girls are getting more and more involved in this sport, which we love. And people act like, when I was doing this book,
too.
yeah. Well, when I was doing this book, people were acting like, oh, the female gender isn't even a part of the science study yet. So I'm like, well, how could you even think you have an answer with excluding a gender? And they're like, well, they didn't play football. I'm like, Susie Colbert, we were already talking about, was playing youth football when I was playing youth football.
Really?
Yeah, in Philadelphia. Look at her up. She's got a great history.
I got to
You
look
might
up that.
Get that. If she has some memorabilia, you got to get that signed. That would be.
And Nina Marks is a
here.
quarterback, ESPN analyst on radio, mostly radio, and then she does Sunday in the studio with fantasy. Nina Marks is a phenomenal quarterback.
Well, see, I
I
mean,
played some hoops with her. She can rock and roll.
So we can't exclude a gender and think we got any direction either. And you have to, because there's so many cases outside of the sporting arena. You can't quit blaming sports and specifically football because it's outside of that arena. That's why it is. The narrative in the media is just so far ahead of what the real science is saying.
I love this book just because it gets the conversation going again,
and
which
that's
is
what
what's
we need.
important.
We
right?
really need a balanced
now
conversation.
You got a legitimate argument because it seemed very one-sided without a lot of backup. But you believe what you read, you believe what you hear, and there's so much hype about it. We have time for a couple questions here. Have we got a couple questions there, Ben? And we're just to grab in there to finish the pod off. Are you a Sunday watching a lot of games? Or are you at Saturday? You get to watch your kid now? Do we find you in Utah?
Ironically, my son is dealing with a toe injury that he had 2 years ago. Ironically, what's kind of interesting? I told you about the concussion he had in the shower. Well, he sustains one in a game against Wisconsin. This is 2 years ago, and they're the fifth best team in the country. I mean, they came into BYU and throttled us. In fact, I share that particular story in the book because it is relevant because he had a concussion outside of the sporting arena. He gets one in it. The next week he has another one after their bye week. Even though he cleared, got back to protocol, I knew I needed to take him and get him evaluated by Mickey Collins at UPMC. Probably the best in the country in advanced treatment and how they look at the 6 areas of concussions or 6 areas of the brain that could be affected. Identifying that, finding out if you're vulnerable, which he was in the vestibular area, and then giving him a treatment plan cognitively and physically. And watching, after 10 days of him doing this treatment protocol, how much, just talking to him on the phone, I was like, boy, I hadn't heard that for 2 years, because he really hadn't recovered from the slip in the shower. But to see his own confidence about returning back to the game, in knowing that I've repaired my head, I feel strong about it, I'm confident about it, and the thing that he never felt good about is still haunting him to this day, that we're now going to get surgery on, his toe. So he got his toe hurt the same time he had the concussion.
So is he a redshirt this year, or
he already redshirted? So
he's still got
it's a
another
2-year
year?
deal. He's got another year, but we'll petition for a medical hardship year because he's been robbed 2 years.
Salt Lake City, though.
Yeah, it's Provo, beautiful. I mean, it's gorgeous in the West. I'm from the West
nice,
predominantly.
Man, it's so nice there.
Yeah.
I'll have to keep a closer eye on him as we move forward. Cool.
Yeah.
A couple questions.
Yeah, you mentioned earlier about just like the misconceptions in the media about CTE and its connection to football. Like, what are the top 2 biggest problems that you see in the media that are reported about CTE?
Well, I think when you look at what some of the biggest problems in the media is the words you use that are used, and the words are really important to people. Like, somebody kept using the word. I was doing an interview, and he goes, "What about linked?" I'm like, well, that's a media-driven word. When you read the science, it even cautions you in a lot of the papers not to use terms like that, not to use it for any sense of direction and policy or how bad the disease could be. And then when you see that in the media, what would people think when they see the word linked? There's a connection, and that means there's a cause. And when you really talk to the experts, you go back to Dr. Cummings in this book. I mean, all of them that I've talked to, they're in the book. They're like, you can't use that because the science papers aren't there yet. We are not there with science. We are in the observation state. They kept pulling me back. We're in the observation state. We can't tell you anything beyond that. And so that's why, I mean, it's just a lot of different words that would lead you to believe that there is a link or it is caused. When you look at the science papers, those words are not only not there, but they caution you in how you go about using it. And I think that's probably what disturbed me, because it's the same people who wrote the science paper who are being interviewed in the media, and they contradict what they wrote in the science paper.
But would you say, just trying to get a perspective here, that in a sense then football on a professional or on a serious level is in the right direction?
Absolutely. And I don't think they've gotten enough credit across the board. We look at youth football, all of the things. When you walk to a youth football practice, this is how we practice. When I practice, okay, this is when I started in 2003. We practiced twice a week. We had 15 minutes of live contact once every 2 weeks. I never had any kid get a concussion during practice. We used pads, equipment. There's so many drills that can be used to execute how you play the game. And everybody goes, well, tackle, like flag, you don't tackle, but you kind of learn how to tackle. That's like not even a third of the game. You got to teach how to take on a tackle. You got to teach how to block, how to get off a block. There's so many elements of the game that need to be taught. It's not just tackling. Then there's hydration, fitting of equipment, how do you structure practice, protocols if you do have it, treatments and therapies available for it. When you look at the sport and what things have been done, and people have talked like there's nothing that's been done, we started doing things in 2007 to give youth football some direction.
Is there
change
any college
the game
that
and
hasn't
help
brought
it.
you in? I mean, do you go and speak to a lot of colleges?
I don't talk to a lot of colleges and
That's the
high
thing
school.
I don't get. Like, I just feel like the college and high school game, especially now high school's elevated, I think they need more outside influence.
Yeah, well,
and yet a lot of coaches are a little hesitant to bring it in.
Well, I think that you had to have, and that's why Dr. Cummings becomes vital. Because listen, this book, has been, I've been challenged to write this book for a long time, and I'm like, I didn't even feel comfortable until I could answer the science.
It's courageous, man. That's the only way I could look at it. Like, you're going against the grain. You went and did the work, which is, it's not just you telling a story. You went back to school.
Right. You know, I guess
I love that.
you-
I think it's courageous.
you've built
It's got
a-
me thinking different.
Well, you listen.
Yeah, I mean,
my
I'm not-
goal is really to open people's mind. You know, you don't have to change your mind. That is not the goal. But if you know all the information, let me ask you this: aren't you a better decision maker when you have all the information versus a decision out of fear?
It's a must.
So, read the book. I mean, and if you say, "Hey, listen," after this has happened to Dr. Cummings. Well, here's what I loved about him too. He's a coach. He coaches flag. His son plays football, and really how our paths crossed. He was desired to his son desired to play football, and that's when he went and started really studying the papers to see just all the missing links that are going on versus what he's seeing in the media. There's just a huge disconnect.
It's amazing.
So, you know, that was another reason he became so vital in the book in helping understand and explain.
People have a
it.
question for you. Facebook's the best way? Is the Brainwash page or
Ladies, what do you think is the
what's
best
the best way?
Facebook or Instagram?
Facebook or Instagram?
And he seems like he's going to answer those questions.
Oh yeah, we want to help people. And we want to give them answers, give them
Here's
direction.
my take on this. Brainwash. If you're a football fan, have a kid playing football, if you're coaching football, I don't understand how you can't read this book. You can't afford not to. It's probably a good Christmas gift if you know somebody that's into football, just so they can get the story straight, because I didn't have the story straight, so I got to have to go read this up because I've been on the other end of the spectrum. Merrill Hodge, you see the level of commitment. This conversation doesn't lack anything but. It's a pleasure to have you here, my friend.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It's been a real honor. I've
Thanks.
enjoyed this trip here. I'm telling
Thank
you
you. I'm
immensely.
glad you came
Learned
up.
a lot.
Pick up this book, Amazon, probably your best bet. If you have a football fan, coach, you're a parent, or if you're a kid and somebody that's playing, probably want to know the facts. Seems like he nailed it down in Brainwash.